A Rustydrift RC here today. This just showed up. It's a Tamiya Hornet. It's something I've been wanting for a little while now. My older brother, had a grasshopper when I was real little. Loved that thing. Really wanted one of my own. This is just a step above the grasshopper. A little bit of a trip down memory lane here. So I'm gonna say this should be a fun build. First thing I'm gonna do is alright, first I'm gonna start off building the gearbox. This is a relatively simple unit. This is was originally released as the Hornet in 1984. It's the same gearbox used in the on the grasshopper. Same gearbox used on the lunchbox. Relatively simple, but also relatively strong. I'm upgrading these the plastic bushings in the kit up to bearings. When you put the pinion on, make sure you use some thread lock. Again, they recommend 16 millimeters. Next, the upper shock mount with the and body mount go onto the rear of the chassis. It just slides up in like that, and then use a bolt and a washer and a nut, and they just to hold that in place. All right, next I've got to install work on the rear axle stays. Installing the springs that go on those on the pin. And bolt through the hole. Okay, now once you get the bolt, your screw in there, and your spring, and take your spring and put it up over that screw temporarily. And you want to do that on both sides. Now to attach the gearbox to the chassis, you've got your shaft here. You can put a little bit of grease on that, slide that through. Your axle stays. Going to kind of go over. Okay, you're going to want to put both of them on at the same time and hold it. And then you're going to slide the whole unit together into the back of the chassis. These stays slide right into those slots. You got to do both at the same time, just while it's holding it together. In there, in place. Now that that's in place, those screws that you put in to hold the springs, those screws come out, and then you put the 2 screws on each side here to hold that axle in place. Alright, now Nerf bars get installed. Get one screw there and one screw there. Alright, next got to build the shocks. Start off with shock shaft and these tiny little E-clips. Alright. The important thing is don't send these flying across the room. Alright. I'll get in the bottom groove on that shaft first. Okay, once that's in there, take your piston, these little plastic pistons. Okay, slide that over. And then you want to lock it in place with another E-clip. Okay, snap it in there. You want to do that to both pistons. Alright, once you've got both shafts assembled, you take the small brass pistons they give you and the two 3mm O-rings and put the O-rings around the piston. Okay, you're going to want to move the piston up and down a couple times. Make sure you got all the air bubbles out. Put this in there. And you want to install it all the way down. There's a part on your parts tree used as a tool to push that down all the way. And get that seated. Wipe off any excess oil. And then you got a screw that'll go down in there. Once you've got that screw tightened up, then you're going to want to take your rear spring. Okay. Put that over top. You got the collar here. You add a little extra tension to the spring. Then you got your small spring. Okay, your damper spring goes inside there. And then your shock cap. Okay, the ball sits into a little socket on the axle there. And then you've got your little metal cup here. It's gonna go ahead and lock that in place with two screws on each side. Okay, you got a tube that's gonna go through the shock mount or the upper shock, and then your screw is gonna go through it and into the chassis. Alright, and it goes in like that. And then you've got your upper shock mount right there. Alright, so I've centered the servo. I'll put the servo saver together on there and measured out the links and assembled the links and put the servo mounts onto the servo. Now I've got to mount the servo into the chassis. You're going to mount it with two screws and washers right there. Mount the body mount up front right here. And then you got two more screws in the Nerf bars right here to hold those on. Alright, now I'm going to start working on the front suspension, these swing arms here. Okay, so both the done pretty much the same left and right. Okay, you take your one, you take the spindle, and your pin. Right here, your spring mounts. Alright, now both of those swing arms are assembled. Alright, and you get your lower shock mounts. And you get the little sleeves. They go in the sleeve goes through the shock mount. And then into the spring mount there. The nut and the bolt. Pull that together. Your ball stud goes on the outer hole of the steering arm. Alright, now to flip the car over. We can install your steering arms in there, in the slots. Here, this plate locks them down. 3 screws. Now you can go ahead and attach the tie rods. You just go ahead and put them on in, and they snap in place. These are pretty simple, but if it's a little tough for you, you can go ahead and squeeze it with a pair of pliers. Alright, for the front dampers, you take the piece of rubber tubing they give you, and you're going to cut 2 pieces that are 5 millimeters long, one for each side. Alright, then when you go to assemble everything, there's a couple spacers at the top, one for each side. There's 2 different sizes. There's a thicker one and a thinner one, depending on if you want a harder or softer suspension. I'm using the one for the stiffer suspension, the thicker spacer. With that, you want to put 2 O-rings in the top of that spacer. If you're using the thinner spacer, you only use 1 O-ring in each side. Okay? Alright, these 3-piece wheels, they can be a little tricky sometimes on these. They're a pain to get that center section in. Again, the center section, you're going to want to get that in the front tire first. Well, you want to get all the way in. Alright, once you've got all the screws in for the front and back tires, it's time to put the wheel adapters on the back. Alright, now go ahead and put your back tires on and your lock nuts. Alright, now to put the front tires on. I'm going to use 2 bearings on each wheel. Okay, now the battery cover just sets on the bottom here and slides in place, locks in place. All set. Got the complete roller here. Just need to install the ESC and receiver, and then do some body work.